12-year-old Julian Hawthorne sat at his mahogany desk, the afternoon sunlight barely illuminating the mountain of graded papers in front of him. Scarlet letters, F, 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 stared back at him from every page, a relentless reminder of failure. His pencil rolled idly between his fingers, untouched, as a knot of frustration and shame twisted in his stomach. He had tried. Every day he had tried. But no matter how hard he studied, no matter how many extra hours he spent poring over textbooks, the results never changed. From the doorway, his father, Richard Hawthorne, observed the scene with his usual piercing gaze. Richard, a billionaire known for building empires and commanding attention in boardrooms, expected nothing less than perfection. To him, failure wasn't just unacceptable, it was a personal affront. And yet here was Julian, his only son, drowning in red marks and utter confusion, seemingly incapable of meeting the simplest academic expectations. "You're useless," Richard barked, his voice cutting through the silence of the grand Hawthorne mansion. The words were sharp, deliberate, designed to wound. "If you don't start improving immediately, I'll have no choice but to send you to a boarding school. Maybe they'll be able to teach you what I obviously cannot." Julian flinched, feeling the sting of humiliation. He had already been struggling in silence, doubting himself with every wrong answer, every failed attempt. His father's words weren't just criticism, they were a verdict. A sentence declaring him inadequate, unworthy, a disappointment in the eyes of a man who equated value with success. Yet, amidst this tension, someone new entered the room. Marissa, the newly hired maid, stepped in quietly, carrying a basket of neatly folded laundry. She was a young black woman, calm and observant, her presence almost soothing in contrast to the harsh energy that filled the room. Though she had only been with the Hawthorne family for a week, she had already begun to notice patterns, small details that others overlooked. When her eyes fell on Julian, hunched over his failed tests, something inside her stirred. She recognized that familiar look of quiet desperation, the same one she had known as a child. Marissa had been 12 once, sitting at a tiny kitchen table in a small, modest home, struggling with her own schoolwork under the watchful, critical eyes of adults who didn't understand her. Her late mother had found a way to guide her through that struggle, using patience, creative techniques, and encouragement rather than punishment. Marissa had never forgotten those lessons. They were etched into her soul. She set the laundry basket down gently and spoke, her voice soft but firm. "Julian," she said, "can I sit with you for a moment?" Julian looked up, startled. No one had ever asked him that before. No tutor, no teacher, not even his father. I guess," he mumbled. Marissa knelt beside him. "I see something," she said. "You're not failing because you're lazy or incapable. You're failing because no one has shown you the way that works best for you. And that's not your fault." For the first time in months, Julian felt a glimmer of hope. Her words were different from the harsh criticism he had grown used to. They acknowledged his struggle without judgment. Over the next several days, Marissa observed him closely. She noticed that Julian excelled at recognizing patterns, but struggled with memorization. He could understand complex concepts when explained visually, but froze with abstract multiple-choice questions. Rather than pushing him with rigid exercises, she introduced creative methods, color-coded charts, visual storytelling, and games that transformed learning into an interactive adventure. Little by little, Julian began to respond. His confidence, once shattered, began to rebuild. A smile appeared on his face, small at first, hesitant, but it was a smile nonetheless. And even though Richard remained skeptical, hovering in the background and questioning the effectiveness of Marissa's unconventional approach, he could not ignore the subtle changes in his son. Julian's focus improved. He asked questions during lessons, participated in discussions, and even began to teach his younger siblings small concepts, repeating the techniques Marissa had introduced. The mansion, which had felt cold and oppressive, started to feel warmer, filled with curiosity and discovery. Richard, a man accustomed to immediate results, remained cautious. He had never encountered a situation in which patience and creative guidance had yielded such visible growth. Yet, as he watched Julian slowly rise from the weight of failure, he felt a shift inside himself, a small but undeniable respect for Marissa's insight and dedication. Evenings in the mansion took on a new rhythm. Julian and Marissa would sit at the desk together, working quietly, sharing laughter over small breakthroughs. Julian began to speak with confidence. explaining ideas in his own words, finding connections between subjects that had previously seemed disjointed. Marissa encouraged him to explore his curiosity, to question, and to think creatively. It wasn't an instant miracle. Red Fs didn't disappear overnight. But cracks began to form in the wall of self-doubt that had trapped Julian for so long. Each small success was a spark, each comprehension a tiny victory that slowly illuminated the darkness that had surrounded him. By the end of the first month, Richard could no longer deny the progress. Julian's posture improved, his engagement increased, and the despair in his eyes was replaced with cautious optimism. The mansion, once a silent witness to failure and frustration, had begun to hum with quiet, persistent hope. Marissa, observing Julian's subtle triumphs, felt a quiet satisfaction. She was not performing a miracle. She was unlocking potential that had always been there. She remembered the lessons her mother had taught her: how to see the unseen, how to nurture, how to transform despair into empowerment. And now, she was passing that wisdom on to Julian. In that moment, the first chapter of Julian's transformation had begun, not through punishment, not through rigid discipline, but through understanding, creativity, and care. And while no one outside the mansion knew it yet, a remarkable journey was underway, one that would ultimately astonish everyone, challenge assumptions, and redefine what it meant to succeed. The days rolled into weeks, and the mansion, once steeped in quiet tension and judgment, began to change subtly. Julian's progress did not go unnoticed. Even the household staff, who had long been accustomed to seeing the boy withdrawn and defeated, began to whisper among themselves about the transformation they were witnessing. Julian, once hesitant to engage, now spoke with clarity and curiosity, asking questions and offering ideas that surprised even the most seasoned tutors. Marissa continued to refine her methods. She observed Julian's every move, paying attention to how he approached each subject, noting his strengths and weaknesses. When he struggled with fractions, she would draw colorful visual representations, turning abstract numbers into tangible puzzles. When he faltered in history, she wove stories that connected events to his own experiences, making them memorable and engaging. Language exercises became interactive adventures, requiring creativity and problem-solving. Julian's confidence grew exponentially. He began to approach his studies not with fear, but with a quiet determination to understand. Mistakes, once devastating, became opportunities for learning. Each success, no matter how small, reinforced a sense of accomplishment that had eluded him for years. Richard watched from the periphery, skeptical yet increasingly intrigued. He had built empires through strategy, precision, and results. He was accustomed to measuring worth by achievements, by the ability to deliver under pressure. Julian's progress, however, was not the result of brute force or conventional methods. It was subtle, transformative, and entirely unexpected. One afternoon, as Julian worked through a particularly challenging math problem, Marissa knelt beside him. "Remember," she said softly, "every time you struggle, you're not failing. You're learning the way your mind works best. Trust yourself." Julian paused, then smiled. "I think I'm getting it now," he admitted, a hint of awe in his voice. "I actually understand it." Marissa's heart swelled with quiet pride. This was the moment she had hoped for, the instant when the seed of potential began to bloom into tangible growth. She had unlocked not just his ability to solve problems, but his confidence to believe in himself. As the mansion's atmosphere shifted, Richard began to notice other changes as well. Julian interacted differently with his siblings, demonstrating patience and clarity as he helped them with their own lessons. He engaged in family conversations, offering insight and perspective that had been absent before. The house, once a place of silent criticism and tension, had begun to hum with a quiet optimism that even Richard could not deny. Then came the evening when the tutor, Ms. Whitman, brought the latest set of graded tests. Julian opened the envelope with trembling hands. As he scanned each page, his eyes widened. The red ink that had haunted him for years was replaced with green check marks, comments of praise, and notes recognizing his progress and insight. Richard, standing behind him, peered over his shoulder. His usual analytical gaze scanned the results, and he felt an unfamiliar sensation: astonishment. The boy who had been on the brink of being sent away to boarding school had not only passed but excelled. Every test reflected comprehension, creativity, and a depth of understanding that no tutor or specialist had previously unlocked. How? Richard murmured, almost to himself. How did this happen? Julian turned to Marissa, his eyes wide with wonder. I I think it was because of you, he said quietly. Marissa shook her head, humility and warmth shining in her expression. You did it, Julian. I only helped you see what was already there. Over the next few days, the mansion buzzed with the impact of Julian's progress. Tutors marveled, household staff whispered in amazement, and Richard found himself grappling with a new understanding of potential. He had spent his life building businesses and controlling outcomes, but here was his son, proving that patience, understanding, and creative guidance could achieve what rigid discipline never could. Julian's confidence now extended beyond academics. He joined discussions in the boardroom, accompanied his father during meetings to observe, and even began to offer insights that, while naive, showed a depth of comprehension and reasoning previously unseen. His curiosity was insatiable. He asked questions about history, science, and human behavior, eager to understand the world around him. Marissa continued to guide him, not as a teacher enforcing discipline, but as a mentor nurturing potential. Each day brought new discoveries, small victories, and moments of joy that reinforced Julian's belief in his own abilities. The mansion, once a symbol of pressure and expectation, had transformed into a place of learning, curiosity, and hope. One evening, as Julian and Marissa reviewed the final assignments before the end-of-term tests, Julian leaned back in his chair and sighed. I never thought I could feel this confident, he admitted. I always believed I was broken, that I was hopeless. Marissa smiled. You were never broken, Julian. You just hadn't been seen for who you really are. Now you are. Richard, who had been observing quietly, felt an unexpected pang of emotion. He had always measured success in numbers, dollars, and outcomes. Yet here was his son, demonstrating a strength and resilience that could not be quantified. The lessons Julian had learned were more valuable than any test score. They were lessons of perseverance, understanding, and self-belief. The mansion had become a place of quiet celebration. Julian's achievements were remarkable, not because they followed the usual paths, but because they reflected the unlocking of true potential. The boy who had been labeled as worthless had, under the guidance of Marissa, revealed intelligence, creativity, and strength that left everyone in awe. And as the sun set over the Hawthorne estate, the first seeds of transformation had firmly taken root, promising a future where Julian's journey was only beginning, and where the lessons learned in these quiet, pivotal months would shape not only his life, but the entire family forever. The final weeks of the term arrived, and Julian's transformation was undeniable. The boy who had once cowered beneath the weight of endless F's now carried himself with quiet confidence. He approached every assignment, every problem, with curiosity instead of fear, and even when mistakes occurred, he treated them as opportunities rather than failures. The mansion, once a silent theater of disappointment and tension, now echoed with laughter, questions, and lively discussions. Richard Hawthorne, who had observed this transformation from the sidelines, felt a profound shift within himself. He had spent decades measuring success by profit margins, achievements, and outcomes, but he was beginning to understand that true value could not be quantified in numbers alone. Julian's journey was teaching him a lesson he had long ignored: the importance of patience, empathy, and recognizing the hidden potential in others. Marissa, ever watchful and patient, continued her guidance. She introduced more complex challenges, not to pressure Julian, but to help him discover the depth of his own abilities. She noticed his analytical skills sharpening, his creativity blossoming, and his natural curiosity expanding beyond the boundaries of the textbooks. Julian began connecting concepts across subjects, applying lessons in innovative ways that even some of his tutors had never anticipated. One late afternoon, as Julian finished a particularly challenging assignment, he looked up at Marissa. I can't believe how much I've learned, he said, a mixture of awe and gratitude in his voice. I never thought I'd actually understand everything. Marissa smiled warmly. You've always had it in you, Julian. I only helped you unlock it. That's all. Richard, standing nearby, cleared his throat. Julian, he said, his voice uncharacteristically soft. I need to tell you something. Julian turned to face his father, uncertain of what to expect. I've been wrong, Richard admitted. I judged you by numbers and results, but I now see the strength, intelligence, and resilience in you that no test could ever measure. You've done something remarkable. Julian's eyes widened. He had spent years under the weight of his father's expectations, never imagining such words of acknowledgement. Thank you. I couldn't have done it without Marissa, he said humbly. Marissa shook her head. You did it, Julian. Every step was yours. When the final report cards arrived, they were a testament not just to academic achievement, but to perseverance, guidance, and growth. Every subject reflected mastery, comprehension, and insight. The green marks and glowing comments replaced years of despair, marking the culmination of Julian's quiet revolution. Richard reviewed the results in stunned silence, then looked at his son and Marissa. I am speechless, he said finally. News of Julian's accomplishments spread quietly among the mansion's staff and tutors. What had seemed impossible had been achieved not by pressure or punishment, but by understanding, patience, and a method tailored to Julian's unique abilities. Even the most skeptical observers could not deny the boy's progress. Beyond academics, Julian's transformation affected his entire life. He approached social situations with confidence, engaged his siblings in learning, and began to take responsibility for his actions. He had learned that failure was not a sentence, but a step along the path of growth. More importantly, he had learned to trust himself and his abilities. The mansion itself seemed transformed. The heavy air of expectation and judgment had lifted, replaced by a sense of curiosity, warmth, and possibility. Richard often found himself watching Julian, struck by the realization that the boy had grown into a young individual whose potential extended far beyond grades or scores. Marissa continued to mentor him quietly, always patient, always observant. She knew the journey was far from over, but the foundation was strong. Julian had unlocked not just knowledge, but the confidence to explore, question, and grow in ways that would continue to shape his life. One evening, as the sun dipped below the horizon, Richard approached Julian and Marissa. I want you both to know, he said, voice steady. What you've accomplished here is extraordinary. Julian, you've proven that resilience, determination, and guidance can overcome obstacles no one thought possible. And Marissa, thank you for seeing what the rest of us couldn't. Julian smiled, the pride and humility blending in his expression. We did it together, he said. Marissa nodded. Always, she agreed. In that moment, the mansion felt like more than just a house of wealth. It felt like a home, a place where potential was nurtured, hope was restored, and the human spirit was celebrated. Julian had not only transformed himself, but had reminded everyone around him of a timeless truth. That true strength lies in perseverance, belief, and the courage to rise above doubt. And as the night settled over the estate, the quiet but powerful change in the Hawthorne family marked the beginning of a new chapter, one where resilience, hope, and understanding would continue to shape their lives forever.